It was a quiet Sunday morning when Rachel heard a faint scratching at her back door. Expecting it to be her golden retriever, Max, coming back from his usual morning wander in the backyard, she walked over casually and turned the knob. But as the door creaked open, the sight before her made her stop cold. Max stood there, still as a statue, his amber eyes calm but focused. Gently held in his soft jaws was a tiny, soaking wet kitten, no more than a few weeks old, shivering and letting out small, pitiful cries. Rachel gasped, her heart clenching. The kitten's fur was matted with dirt, her ribs visible beneath the thin skin, and a small scrape bled on her back leg. And yet, Max held her like she was glass. "Max, what did you do?" Rachel whispered, kneeling down. Max stepped forward slowly, as if knowing how fragile his little bundle was. He lowered his head and carefully placed the kitten at Rachel's feet, then sat down beside her, his tail wagging once as if to say, "Asterisk, please help her." Asterisk. Rachel scooped the kitten into a towel and glanced back at Max, who followed her every move with eyes full of concern. In that moment, she realized something remarkable. Max hadn't just found the kitten. He had rescued her, protected her, and brought her home like family. Max stepped into the house with deliberate care, his movements slow and mindful, as if he understood just how delicate the little life in his mouth truly was. Rachel, still stunned, dropped her knees in the middle of the living room. Her heart pounded as Max approached, his golden fur slightly damp from the morning dew, his eyes never leaving the tiny creature he carried. With the gentleness of a mother, Max lowered his head and placed the kitten on the soft rug. The tiny ball of fur was trembling, barely able to hold herself up. Her meows were faint, like whispers of desperation. Her eyes were sealed shut with crust, her fur soaked and tangled, her ribs visible under her fragile frame. Max immediately lay beside her and began to lick her tiny head. Not out of curiosity, but with intention, like he was trying to calm her, to let her know she wasn't alone anymore. Rachel watched, breath caught in her throat. She had seen Max gentle before, but this was something different, protective, parental. A rush of emotion surged through her. She quickly grabbed a warm towel and wrapped the kitten gently, but Max didn't move away. He stayed close, his nose brushing the kitten's cheek, occasionally letting out soft whines. He was watching over her, guarding her. Somehow, in the stillness of that morning, Max had become more than a pet. He had become a rescuer. Rachel's instincts kicked in, shaking off the initial shock. She gently wrapped the frail kitten in a soft towel and rushed her to heater. The little body was ice cold, barely responsive. Rachel knelt beside her, holding her close to the warmth, whispering softly in hopes the kitten could feel some comfort. Max hovered nearby, his head low, eyes focused on every move Rachel made. He didn't bark, didn't wander off. He simply stayed, a silent guardian. When Rachel brought out a syringe of kitten formula she kept from a previous rescue years ago, Max inched closer, watching intently as Rachel gently coaxed a few drops into the kitten's mouth. The kitten barely had the strength to swallow, but she tried. Rachel's heart swelled. This tiny life was fighting, and Max had given her a chance. As the kitten rested, finally beginning to warm, Rachel turned to Max and softly said, "Where did you find her, boy?" She knew there were no stray animals in the area, no nearby nests, no sound of other kittens. Max simply looked at her, then out toward the backyard, toward the woods beyond their fence. That's when it hit her. Max hadn't just stumbled across the kitten. He had gone beyond the yard, ventured into the trees, found her, chosen to bring her back. This wasn't an accident. It was an act of love, of instinct, of rescue. Later that afternoon, with the kitten resting in a small basket beside a warm blanket and Max, keeping close watch, Rachel grabbed her coat and headed outside. She needed answers. Where had this kitten come from? Had someone lost her? Was there a mother cat frantically searching nearby? She walked through the neighborhood, knocking on doors, showing a photo of the kitten on her phone. Each neighbor responded with the same gentle shake of the head. No, they hadn't seen a kitten. No strays had been hanging around. No one was missing a pet. Rachel checked the local app, posted in community groups, but nothing turned up. The silence was unsettling. It was as if the kitten had appeared from nowhere, abandoned by the world, yet somehow found by Max. On her way back home, something caught her eye on the sidewalk near the edge of the woods. A faint trail of tiny paw prints, barely visible in the dust, leading away from the trees. Rachel followed them slowly, her breath catching as they veered toward a storm drain at the side of the road. She knelt and peered inside. It was dark and damp, the echo of dripping water the only sound. Nothing stirred now, but it wasn't hard to imagine the tiny kitten, cold and alone, mewing helplessly in the dark. Maybe she had crawled out, or maybe Max had found her there, heard her cries, and pulled her to safety. Rachel stood up slowly, her eyes stinging. Max hadn't just found the kitten. He had saved her from a place no human would have thought to look. Rachel stood frozen beside the storm drain, heart pounding as she took in the dark, wet tunnel below. The scent of damp leaves and muddy water filled the air. The previous night's rain had filled the drain nearly to the top. Any small creature trapped inside would have stood little chance. Her mind raced back to the kitten's shivering body, her matted fur, the soaked condition she'd arrived in. It all made sense now. Max must have heard her cries, followed them to the fence, and somehow pulled her out before the rising water took her. Rachel's eyes welled with tears. She imagined her gentle golden retriever braving the mud and cold, driven by some deep instinct not just to explore, but to save. When she returned home, the kitten was curled up in a blanket, barely more than a trembling ball of fur, with Max lying protectively beside her. Rachel knelt down and gently stroked her tiny head. "You're safe now," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Thanks to Max." She looked at the window as raindrops began to fall again, softly tapping the glass. The same rain that could have ended this little life, but instead marked the start of her second chance. Rachel smiled through her tears. "Rainy," she said, "that's your name." And from that day on, Rainy became part of their little family. The kitten who survived the storm, thanks to the heart of a golden hero. In the days that followed, a beautiful bond began to blossom. Max and Rainy became completely inseparable, as if they had always been part of the same story. Wherever Max went, Rainy followed, or more often, rode along. The tiny kitten loved to curl up on Max's broad back, her little paws draped over his golden fur, as she napped peacefully, safe and warm. Max, ever the gentle guardian, seemed to understand her fragility. He would nudge her water bowl closer when she was too tired to move. He carried her small toys, little plush mice and feather balls, in his mouth and placed them gently into her basket. He even let her playfully bat at his ears without so much as a flinch. Rachel couldn't believe what she was seeing. She began filming short clips of their daily interactions. Rainy batting Max's nose, Max licking her tiny head. The two of them curled up in the sunbeam by the window. It was more than cute. It was pure love. When she shared their story and videos online, it didn't take long for the world to notice. Comments flooded in, full of awe and admiration. People from all over the world were moved by the golden retriever, who had rescued a kitten from a storm drain, then cared for her like his own pup. Rachel smiled as she watched the two together, the loyal dog and the storm-born kitten. Their friendship wasn't just heartwarming. It was healing, and the world needed more of it. At the vet's office, Rachel sat nervously while Rainy was examined. The tiny kitten, though now warm and fed, was still fragile. The veterinarian gently checked her vitals, carefully listening to her heartbeat, and examined her injuries. After a long moment, he looked up with a solemn expression. She was very lucky, he said. Another few hours in that cold, and she likely would have gone into full hypothermia. Her body temperature was dangerously low when you brought her in. If your dog hadn't found her when he did. Rachel swallowed hard, her eyes drifting to Max, who was sitting nearby, tail thumping softly as he watched Rainy through the glass. "But she's stable now," the vet added with a smile. "She's a little fighter. And your dog, well, I've seen a lot of animals in my time, but his instincts, they're remarkable." Rachel nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. She looked at Max and realized something with absolute clarity. Rainy wasn't just a rescue. She was meant to be here. Rachel had been hesitant to adopt another pet. After all, Max was already a handful. But this wasn't a decision anymore. Max had made it for her. He hadn't just saved Rainie's life. He had welcomed her into theirs. That night, Rachel watched as Rainie curled into Max's chest, purring softly, his paw resting protectively over her tiny frame. She knew then that Rainie's survival wasn't just a miracle. It was an act of love, pure, loyal, and life-saving. Months later, the tiny, trembling kitten that Max had carried to the door had blossomed into a lively, confident young cat. Rainie now bounded through the house with grace and mischief, her once fragile frame now strong and healthy. But despite her growth, one thing remained the same. Max was still her guardian, her protector, and her very best friend. The bond between them had only grown stronger. They were inseparable, like two pieces of the same soul. Rainie often curled up in the crook of Max's belly by the window, both of them watching birds flutter past with matching calm expressions. Other times, she'd bat at his tail or try to steal his favorite toy, and Max would let her, tail wagging gently in amusement. Rachel often caught them eating from the same bowl, Max patiently waiting while Rainie pawed at her share. There was never a growl or grumble between them, only silent understanding and affection. Each time Rachel passed by and saw them together, Rainie sprawled across Max's back or curled under his chin. Her heart swelled. The image never got old. It reminded her that love doesn't always follow logic, and family doesn't always come by blood. What had begun with a rainy morning rescue had turned into something truly extraordinary, a story of loyalty, survival, and an unbreakable friendship.